This is Rob Tubbett for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined once again by WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman. We're here ahead of Canelo Alvarez versus Sergey Kovalev in Las Vegas. How are you, Mauricio? Nice to see you again.
Great. I'm very excited. It's going to be a great night of boxing.
I'm going to try and get this out before the fight. So let's talk a little bit about the fight before we come on to a few other things. Canelo Alvarez jumping up 2 weight classes to challenge Sergey Kovalev at 175 pounds. What do you make of that? Quite a risk is the kind of the general consensus among boxing fans.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. It's untested waters for Canelo. Moving up 2 weight categories against a very solid champion, very strong, he's been a champion of good level for many years. So it's going to be a very interesting match.
Explain to me what's on the line tonight. So we've got the WBO light heavyweight title. We're going to talk about the franchise title. You know that, I know that. That's what we're here for. Is Canelo's representing the WBC tonight as the franchise champion? Is how I understand it. Is that correct?
That's correct. He's representing the WBC. When he was appointed and agreed to be franchise champion, there are certain things that he is agreed to do. One is to represent always the WBC inside the ring and outside the ring. He's got social responsibility topics that he will do together with the WBC, and just a combination of situations where the intention of this designation is to bring the boxing industry to continue to grow.
So just to clear it up, because as I said, there's quite a lot of confusion around it. If Canelo loses tonight, he's still franchise champion.
Yeah, the franchise, it's not a new championship or a title, it's a designation. So there's no new belt, there's no new situation. It's a non-transferable designation to allow a boxer of a specific characteristics to perform and grow the industry of the sport.
Now, as I said, we're going to talk about the franchise title. Obviously, the most recent of which is Vasyl Lomachenko being anointed franchise champion at lightweight and Devin Haney being upgraded. I feel like this is the 3rd interview we've done in 3 months about the franchise title, Mauricio, or the franchise champion, and I'm still quite confused. Can you clear it up for me? Just explain the franchise champion again, how somebody is anointed franchise champion, what does the WBC look for in a franchise champion, etc.
Sure. This is a new concept. The idea behind is to promote the sport and to advance the sport, to give those very few fighters who have gone into a very exclusive position in their boxing career, those fighters who run the sport worldwide, to allow them to give the fans the fights that the fans want to see, to allow them to compete in different weight categories, to allow them to compete for other organizations, not to stop the growth of the sport, not to intervene into a position which can hurt and disrupt the continuity of the sport.
Okay. Vasyl Lomachenko was elevated to franchise champion. Devin Haney elevated from interim champion to WBC champion. Explain to me the reasoning behind that.
When you have a interim champion and the world champion of the division does not fight him for whatever reason, medical, retire, or simply vacate the title, the interim champion becomes the world champion. So it's a rule that has always existed, and Charlo was the interim champion in the middleweight division. When Canelo was awarded the distinction of franchise champion, then he became the world champion as well.
Vasyl Lomachenko has only recently boxed. He boxed August the 31st, I remember that because it's my daughter's birthday, against Luke Campbell over in London. It's a very, very quick turnaround. To my knowledge, Vasyl Lomachenko is not injured. He's not in a position to be giving up the title. So why is there a need for Devin Haney to be upgraded from interim champion to full champion?
Because Lomachenko petitioned to be awarded the franchise champion status. So the WBC voted in favor, and now he's a franchise champion, and Haney is a champion of the division. I understand the confusion. I understand someone who might question it. I'm just asking everybody to give just a little patience and let this flow. We are in 2019. Boxing rules go back to the WBC's 1963. We are in the era of the technology, of instant replay, of open scoring, of having officials in a different way. So give it a try, give it a chance. We don't intend to confuse anybody. We just want the champions to continue fighting the best fights possible. Canelo has a very important contract where he has to comply the best fights. So Canelo will be doing, now he's fighting at 175. Tomorrow he might go down 68, 60, continue. So it's a matter that we're just trying to create activity at the highest level for the big names that have such responsibility around the world.
Canelo Alvarez is still a champion at 160 though, is that correct?
Well, he is a champion. As mentioned, he won the championship in 160. Lomachenko won in 135. And the designation just gives them leverage to do the best fights that the fans want to see.
The reason why I ask is I spoke to Bill Haney, obviously Devin Haney's dad and his manager, part of his training team, and we were trying to talk about how do you get an undisputed champion with a franchise champion in the division? Does Devin Haney have to beat Lomachenko and then beat Teofimo, the winner of Lopez Comi? Does Lomachenko? It's all very confusing. How do you get an undisputed champion when there's a franchise champion in the division?
Do you think that the undisputed champion is the top priority in the world of the sport?
For fans, I would say yes.
How many unified champions have there been?
Undisputed?
Yeah.
Probably half a dozen, maybe.
Very few. So it's a matter of great importance. And I'm sure that if Canelo or Lomachenko fight a fighter who has the other three belts, it's going to be an undisputed. I mean, we are not concerned about the statistics. We're not concerned about the books. We're concerned about the best fights. We want to give the fans the best fights in the ring. So if the concern is that, oh my God, there's never going to be an undisputed champion, I put that in a second tier with a much more importance of giving today the best fights that are possible with the best fighters.
We've spoken in the past about, I appreciate what you're saying in the fact that there hasn't been an awful lot of undisputed champions in the sport, certainly in the last decade, 20 years, or however far you go back. But we've spoken in the past at length about boxing fans or casual fans of the sport, should we say, not knowing who the champion is. Would an undisputed champion not clear that up? You have one champion in the division, the man who is the man, there's no dispute. Is that not good for the sport?
Of course, it's great for the sport, but you can ask any casual fan or casual person who Lomachenko is and who Canelo is, and they will tell you.
If Vasyl Lomachenko fights the winner of Richard Commey and Teofimo Lopez, and he beats them, is he undisputed champion?
Of course.
But Devin Haney has the WBC.
Lomachenko represents the WBC and is the WBC champion.
But Devin Haney has the belt.
Both have the belt.
Can you see why I'm confused?
Yes, I see it and I appreciate it. Let it grow. Let's see where it goes. Do you want to see Lomachenko fighting the winner of the other fight?
Absolutely.
Me too. So maybe if we do not have the franchise, would interfere in the possibility of doing that.
I spoke to Eddie Hearn the day after Devin Haney was elevated. Obviously, he represents Devin Haney, and I asked him, does this make Devin Haney versus Vasyl Lomachenko a more realistic fight or a less realistic fight? And he couldn't tell me the answer. What do you think?
It makes it more realistic at the moment when it's ready to happen. Some fights need to grow into the moment where they have to take place. The big fights grow into a time, and that's the case.
Forgive me, Mauricio, what's wrong with the conventional way that the WBC have done it in the past, in a sense of you become mandatory challenger, then the champion will have a voluntary, and then his mandatory will be called, or he can take a unification fight or an undisputed fight, which would then trump the mandatory, or if he wants to make another voluntary, you can pay step-aside money to the mandatory. What was wrong with that? Why did there need to be a change?
Because it has disrupted, the rules are so different. Today we have 4 world championships. You have challengers moving to challenge for other organizations. You have fighters that unify and then they have to be stripped or they have to leave one of the belts because of that same rule. We're looking at the mandatory contender rule to try to find the best formula. The mandatory contender rule is the obligation of a champion so he does not duck, to call it in a way, the best challenger. And sometimes the mandatory contender is not the best challenger or the best fight out there. It's a combination I'm sure that in a year, 2 years, we will be talking about the great results of this movement, because it's only positive.
Sure, I mean, potentially we will in a year, 18 months or 2 years. I mean, it's a bit early to say at this point. I think everyone's trying to get used to it, myself and yourself included.
Me too. I mean, I'm going to be blunt. I am confused at times, and I don't like to stand or sit around without a response to something. Mm-hmm. But we have tried things. We have tried great things. We have had great success. When we changed from 15 to 12 rounds, my father was booed in the arenas. But we have saved so many lives. When the weigh-in was changed to a day before the fight, when we introduced the clean boxing program, when we do the training of officials, when we spend millions of dollars in medical research. So it's a new concept, and it's going to be great. It's going to be very positive, because it's giving the possibility of many better, greater fights without holding them into a box.
Back to the rankings and what you just said about the mandatory challenger, I think that's very interesting. If a mandatory challenger is not worthy or is not an attractive fight to the champion, why would the WPC rank them or anoint them that status as a mandatory challenger? And on the flip side, if a champion doesn't want to fight his mandatory challenger, should he not be stripped of his title?
Yeah, that is a case, that is a rule, and we have been consistent in that. To become mandatory challenger, you must win a final elimination bout. So we have consistently done that. We have ordered tournaments to find the best mandatory challenger, and then those fights fell off. So it's a continuous process, and we are transparent. We are open to every question, and we never say no to an interview or to clarify anything. So we're doing our best. We are working hard, and we represent the world. And just ask Charlo and ask Lomachenko, what do they think about the franchise? And that's the response.
I do appreciate that, and you have always been, you've never turned down an interview with me. I've done countless interviews with you in the last 12, 18 months. I do always appreciate your time. Bless you there. Where was I going with that? Yeah, what would have been wrong with Devin Haney being the interim champion, Lomachenko fighting the winner of Comi Lopez, and then the mandatory being called, or Lomachenko having a voluntary defense and then the mandatory being called for Devin Haney? And if Lomachenko didn't want the Devin Haney fight, he gets stripped of his WBC title. What would have been wrong with that situation?
If we were promoters, if we were matchmakers, if we were the ones with the control of what happens, it would be a different story. In all other sports, that's the way it works. In the UFC, they control who fights against who. They have the rankings, they have the promotion, they have everything. It's a closed world. Here, there are so many different elements that we cannot control. A manager, a promoter, a site, whatever happens, we cannot rule. You just gave me a scenario with 3 if. And there's so many times that one of those ifs goes south. So what we are taking away that if, we're giving the opportunity to Lomachenko to fight the winner of Teofimo and Comi, or we're giving the opportunity of Lomachenko to fight Berchelt, or giving the opportunity to Lomachenko to fight Haney. I mean, it's a win-win for everybody. Lomachenko has won that right to become a fighter of elite in the ring, same as Canelo. So we're giving them a benefit that they can enforce, and they're only looking for greater fights. They're not looking to any downgrade on anything. So give it time.
I understand that. I understand you're not a promoter, you're not a matchmaker, but that being said, you can say to them, fight your mandatory or we'll strip you, no?
Yes. That's a rule. That's a rule. That's a common rule. And I invite you, let's have a cup of coffee and we can review 4 or 5 years. And I'll show you division by division how it works and what has worked and what has happened. And we can make a case. I would love to do that, and you can share it to the world.
I'll always be willing for a cup of coffee. Dillian Whyte, his situation again has become more and more unclear. As I understand it, his mandatory is not going to be called now until 2021. Is that correct?
Let's go back. Dillian Whyte is in a process from a adverse finding by UCAD. It is highly confidential and highly legal. There's many legalities involving that. We had met with Dillian Whyte, his representatives. We are doing our ongoing investigation. So the fight with Fury against Wilder in February, will be the mandatory of that year, of that period, and we have set the next mandatory for February 2021. If Dillian Whyte is cleared of everything and of the process, he's confirmed as interim champion and mandatory challenger, he's got secured February 2021 the championship fight against the champion, whoever he is.
As I understand, he can still box outside of the UK, no?
He's not suspended.
Sure.
He might be able even to fight in the UK. He's not suspended at all. He's going through a process of the investigation of something that happened. It occurred. So they're doing their investigation. The WBC is doing its own investigation, and we're coming out with the results.
How did Fury end up as the mandatory for 2020 when Dillian Whyte has been in the #1 contender slot for such a long time? Obviously, there was the issue with Dominic Breazeale becoming the mandatory challenger for Deontay Wilder. How did Tyson Fury usurp him?
Go back to all that.
Okay, yeah, forget Dominic Breazeale. But how did Tyson Fury become the mandatory for 2020 over Dillian Whyte, who has been ranked at #1 for so long? Is it the UK situation?
It's because Dillian is not available at this moment.
But he can box outside the UK.
Yeah, he's not suspended, but there's an inquiry. It's something that is being investigated. So his status, if he was to fight Wilder, he can fight him as a voluntary. He's not suspended whatsoever. But his right that he earned as mandatory and interim champion right now is suspended until everything is cleared.
Just final question, because I know there's some people who are waiting to speak to you. Very sorry, you're a very popular man around these parts. We've spoken in the past about, we're not going to name any names, but other sanctioning bodies who have multiple champions per weight class. We've spoken in the past about how that's not good for the sport, how it really dilutes the nature of being a champion. Explain the difference between the WBC having a champion and a franchise champion to these other organisations who have super champions, regular champions, etc.
Yeah, the franchise is a designation to a very limited amount of fighters. We have 2 right now. That might be for years. Maybe there will not be another one. We don't know. But it's not a multiplying effect. It's just a designation for these 2 fighters so they can go out and do the great fights.
What does that say to other WBC champions, though, who aren't elevated to franchise champion? Deontay Wilder's had 8 defences, I believe, of the WBC. 10 defences, beg your pardon, Deontay, if you're watching, of the WBC heavyweight title, yet he's not franchise champion yet, whereas Lomachenko boxed for a vacant title in his first fight for the WBC. He is a franchise champion. How do you think it makes other WBC champions feel that they're not considered franchise champions by the WBC?
The WBC champion is the best. The WBC champion is the champion of the world. And Wilder is very active. Wilder has Ortiz lined up, Fury lined up, so he has not petitioned for any designation. That would be more for ego, the way you are portraying it. But the WBC is very proud of each of our champions, and they are the best in the division, and they are the WBC champions, so there's no issue of that.
Okay, Mauricio, as I've mentioned in this interview, always make time for me in Boxing Social. Do appreciate your time. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. You owe me a cup of coffee.
Big time.
Thank you.